Welcome back to another episode of the Mainly Hoops podcast. We've had a couple days of great basketball games, Tuesday and Wednesday, with the Big 12 Big East Challenge and the SEC and ACC Challenge. Today is a bit of a dud day. The highlight of the day is maybe TCU and Xavier. Penn State whacked Purdue at home. Those are really the only two notable games. But man, we had some great games over the last couple of days. Going back to Tuesday, which was our pick of the day for those that listened in to our Best Bets episode. We had Kentucky on the road at Clemson, and Clemson took care of business. It wasn't necessarily easy. They didn't shoot the ball great, especially early, but their defense kind of held strong, overcame a small deficit early, made some adjustments, and ended up coming out of there with a win.
Yeah, and I thought after the first 5 minutes, they were the more physical team in this game. I mean, my biggest takeaway was Ian Shefflin shooting 4 for 20 from the field and still being far and away the best player on the floor. I mean, he had a double-double in the first half with, I think he had 11 or 10 and 10 at halftime or something like that. And he finished with 11 and 20 rebounds with 8 of them on the offensive glass. I mean, he was just all over the glass in that game. And then another bright spot in the front court was Miles Foster, who I didn't even realize he only played 9 minutes, but it felt like he was out there for 20 to 25. I mean, he had 7 points, 4 rebounds in those 9 minutes. I thought he was fantastic.
His 9 minutes were awesome. The energy that he came in with, and he just made some scrappy loose ball plays and created some extra possessions for Clemson and really gave them a spark that I thought they needed at the time when he came in there in the first half, when they were kind of struggling to score a little bit, and he provided some cheap baskets, if you will, for them and created some extra opportunities.
For energy in general, just kind of changed the game. I mean, they also did a really good job taking care of the ball and lowering the possession count, which was really one of their only real chances to win this game. I mean, it also helped a little bit that it was a rock fight, and that was the type of game that Kentucky's not going to win. Although they're not a soft team by any means. They're physical up front still, but that's where Clemson hangs its hat. So that's how they ultimately won the game. Kentucky didn't play their best game. Obviously, they missed some open shots that they have typically made, but they were kind of due to miss some of those shots. They had been one of the most fortunate 3-point variance teams in the entire country. And they were also giving open threes to Shefflin and early in the possession, which was the shot they wanted to give up. But ultimately Shefflin just couldn't get one to go. He's not a terrible shooter with a ton of space, but he was kind of, he did. He had a tough night shooting, but I mean, he just does everything so well that, I mean, he could score 0 points and be the best player on the floor.
Right.
And it was essentially what he did, going 4 for 20. I mean, and Kentucky was picked up by Otega Owe. I thought he did a really nice job on Tuesday night. Went for 17 and 7. He's always making big plays. So, but yeah, ultimately, they missed a lot of open looks, but Clemson looked like the more physical team.
Yeah. I thought that, Kentucky's not the number 4 team in the country. So I thought this was a little bit of a reality check for them and their fans, because they're a good team, don't get me wrong, but they're the third or fourth best team in the SEC, not the third or fourth best team in the country. So I thought that this was a good spot to sell on them, as did you. So, props to Clemson. They came out in those first 5 minutes, as you mentioned. They it seemed like they were going to get bothered by Kentucky's length at the rim. Andrew Carr had a couple of blocks and changed some shots, and Clemson was really kind of attacking the rim soft, I thought. But as you said, after that, they really became the more physical team. But I was a little bit worried early on. I thought Kentucky was maybe going to be able to limit their opportunities at the rim. But props to Clemson's defense there in those early minutes for keeping them within striking distance, because if they had let up on that end, they could have been looking at a decent early deficit.
Yeah, Kentucky's a tough team to guard with their spacing,
Yeah.
and to hold them to 66 points is that's an impressive effort.
Yeah. The one player for Clemson that we haven't talked about yet that I wanted to briefly mention is Chauncey Wiggins. He's looked pretty good to start this season, and he seems to look a lot more comfortable out there. His shot seems to be much improved. He looks a lot more comfortable and confident shooting the ball. I think he's shooting it in the low 40s from three. And, if he can give them an efficient 10 points a night with his versatility at 6'10" to guard multiple positions, that's going to be a huge key to raise their ceiling, I think.
Yeah, he's a Brad Brownell type of guy, playing the three at 6'10". Like, he's a versatile big man who can play the four and even like small ball five at times, but Brownell never really does that.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's a big guy to help out with rebounding and spacing, and he just wants a more versatile 3 or 4 man.
Yeah. But big win for Clemson. They're now up to 8-1, I believe. So, good for the Tigers. They seem to be on the right track with Shefflin really leading them. So they should be a force at the top of the ACC. Now, last night we had one of the best games on paper of the year. We had Auburn traveling to Cameron Indoor to play Duke. And Duke, as we talked about in our last episode, had lost both of their marquee games to Kentucky and Kansas. So this was one they really wanted to get. But this time they weren't playing on a neutral site. They were playing on their home court against an Auburn team that was red hot. Probably the hottest team in the country. Probably the best team in the country going into last night. I know Kansas was ranked number 1, but that's just because they were ranked number 1 to start with and they hadn't lost yet. But Auburn really had looked like the best team so far. And early in this game, Auburn jumped out to a big lead, right? They got up 13-3, I think, 15-3, and Duke really weathered the storm behind Isaiah Evans, who had barely been playing. He didn't play in either game against Kentucky or Kansas, and he came out there last night and gave them 18 with, was it all 6 threes in the first half, I believe?
Yeah.
He was awesome. What a spark for them, because they haven't really had great shooting out of their guards in Proctor and Foster so far. So if he can give them that, that's going to be massive for them from a floor spacing perspective, especially for Flag to have more space to work downhill. So Evans, I thought, really obviously picked them up in this game and brought them back into it and ultimately helped them win this game.
Yeah, he was definitely the deciding factor for me. Like, if their offense was kind of stuck in the mud the first like 5-6 minutes of this game until he checked in. He played a 10 or 12 minute stretch and made 5 threes in that stretch, and he was fantastic. It looked like he carved out a role for himself for the rest of the year. Looks like it's at the expense of not playing as much Mason Gillis, as he only played 4 minutes. I kind of figured Gillis might start to get filtered out a little bit. He hasn't shot the ball well, and that's really his only trait on the offensive side. I think he was a little bit of a beneficiary last year, or the 2 years that Edey was so great at Purdue. Like, he got so many open corner threes, and that's what led to him shooting 48, 49%. Like, I just don't think that's where his shooting talent is truly at. So I do think that's a guy who's going to get filtered out of the rotation for Evans, who's a little bit more dynamic. But yeah, I mean, other guys that were really good, Foster and Proctor, they made some big time plays off the dribble against an Auburn team that like forces you to make plays off the dribble, to force you to score in isolation. I think they're they influence the most isolation in the entire country. And guys like Flag, Foster, and Proctor, they were ready for it. Like Foster early on in the game to kind of him with Evans to kind of get this offense out of the mud. And then Flag eventually picked it up and hit a bunch of mid-range jumpers. And I just thought he was fantastic. And, credit to Auburn for, it didn't even seem like they played all that good of a game. And they hung around the entire game. I don't know if they were really ever down double digits in this game, maybe 11 at one point, but it always felt like they were in the game despite not really playing all that well.
Yeah. I made a note before the show. I thought that all of Duke's guards outside of Knipple, and I'll get to him in a minute, but all of Duke's guards really made some key plays, had some stretches in this game that ultimately led to them winning. Obviously, Evans in the first half with his 6 threes. Foster, I thought, made some plays throughout that were really crucial and promising for the future of his season. And then Proctor late. Proctor made the 3 late at the end of the shot clock. That was massive. And then he had another take to the basket late, in the last 4 minutes that really helped put Duke over the finish line. Con Knipple coming into the season was, the talk of Duke basketball. He had a great preseason, really burst onto the scene, but he's struggled a little bit. Last night played 31 minutes, only had 2 points, and he's really not getting to his spots. He's struggling to get open looks. And so, if he doesn't start producing more for them, I find it hard to play him 31 minutes or more in some of these games, especially if Evans is going to shoot the ball like that, and Foster and Proctor are going to produce as much as they did last night.
Yeah, I do think it was a little bit because of the matchup there. Auburn loves to stay connected to shooters, but then again, like, if you're this highly touted recruit and you got hyped up this much, like, you should be able to create some of your own offense off the dribble, like shooting off screens at least, because it's harder to obviously stay connected with off-ball screens. Like, they defend spot up so well, but defending off-ball screens is a little bit of a different story. But yeah, he hasn't shot it well when he's gotten the opportunity. No. I do think he figures it out. I just think it's a bad stretch, and I think he's a super talented shooter. But yeah, bad matchup and maybe a little bit too much hype for the guy early on.
Yeah, but if he does figure it out, which I think he will, that's kind of really, especially if Evans continues to play well and these other 2 guards play well too. Duke's going to be tough. They're going to be tough to defend, and that's really, really going to raise their ceiling.
Yeah, just figure out the late game offense, which I think they did a better job of. And it's probably my pick to win the national championship. Just, they have guys that can go get buckets late in games. Like Proctor, I think he's proven it before. He just never really got the opportunity. It's more up to Shire to put his team in better spots late and not just say, hey, Flag, go into isolation and go win this game for us. Like, he's a 17-year-old about to be 18 years old. Like, you can't put that much pressure on a kid that late in the game.
Yeah. As for Duke's defense, I wanted to talk about this for a little bit. Early in the game, it felt like, they didn't really play well. Auburn was able to get downhill a little bit. They got some open looks early. But then I felt like Duke did a really good job turning up the pressure, pushing Auburn's guards outside of scoring areas, making it a lot more difficult for them to enter the ball into scoring opportunities, which I thought allowed them to come back from that early deficit. I don't know what was said at the under 16. I can't imagine Shire was too happy. But then they came back out, really turned up the pressure. And while they only forced 8 turnovers, I thought that it was really their pressure that pushed Auburn out that ultimately led to their comeback. And they did score 13 points off those 8 turnovers. So they were able to get out and run and produce off those turnovers.
Yeah, I think the adjustment was more Malik Brown over playing Maluach in this game. Like, you can pressure, they play more at the level with ball screens with Brown because he moves so much better than Maluach. Like, Maluach, you can really only play drop because he's not super great at recovering to the rim after. But if you play a guy like Brown, I think he played 25 minutes compared to Maluach's 15. Like, that's how you can turn up pressure. You can force turnovers and get out and run against a team that also wants to get out and run. But if you can beat them in their own kind of game in transition, like, you're going to have a lot of success, and they did.
Yeah. Now on the Auburn side, just to quickly touch on them before we move on to Marquette, Iowa State. First of all, how good is Tahad Pettiford in meaningful games? This dude he's unconscious. He has no fear, right? I guess that's what comes to mind is he's fearless in these games. He takes all the big shots and he makes them.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of Auburn guards have no fear, But this is the guy who can actually put the ball in the basket at a high clip with no fear, and that's
Not
scary.
Katie
Like
Johnson.
that's scary. Yeah, Katie Johnson, Wendell Green, the same kind of thing. Like those guys, like Bruce Pearl tells them, "Hey, you have freedom to take like basically as many shots as you want and be super aggressive." But like him and Miles Kelly, like Miles Kelly was really good too. Like made a couple of 28, 29 footers. Yeah, those two guys, their shooting ability kept them in this game. If Pettiford keeps showing up in big games, like Auburn's ceiling is, I mean, it's a national championship. Everybody knows that, but like it's the undisputed best team in the country if this guard play can continue to play like this, because we've never had concerns about anything else besides the guards.
It's got to be more Pettiford over Denver Jones to me. Like he has not been great. And Baker Mazara has been really good too, shooting it really efficiently. I didn't expect the kind of offensive output that he put out last night, but he played well.
Outside of his antics, he's a really good player.
Yeah, he is. And then Duke's, or not Duke's, but Auburn's adjustment in the second half, I thought, to Duke's pressure was really good by Pearl. They started short rolling those ball screens, and they were hitting Broom there around the free throw line, and he was being a playmaker out of there, getting them a lot of open looks. So that adjustment, I thought, was really key to kind of keep them in the game and weather the storm a little bit, and at least keep that within that 5, 6, 7 point deficit range, so they could at least have a chance at the end. Because otherwise, I thought Duke's defense was just going to force them into taking too many tough shots, and they weren't going to be able to overcome that.
Yeah, and that short roll or slip is always a good counter for a team that's going to blitz a ball screen. And like Broom is such a versatile guy as playing the 5 or the 4, wherever they put him. Like he's going to be able to make plays and get downhill against, obviously Flag's a great like low man in those situations when Brown is elevated in the ball screen, but it's definitely a good trait to have a guy in pick and roll that can make plays like that.
Yeah, I was surprised to see Broom start on Flag defensively, but I know, like coming in, my expectation was that Cardwell wasn't going to be able to play much in this game, just matchup wise. It was a tough one for him, especially where Broom was going to have to guard Flag early, or they were going to have to stick Cardwell on like Knipple, which wasn't going to happen. So, he only ended up playing 11 minutes, I think, which, he's been good so far this season, but last night was just a tough one for him.
Yeah, Flag's a mismatch nightmare when a team's playing the too big lineup. Like a lot of teams are going with those too big lineups now, and a guy like Flag is going to completely expose that and take away like your elite rebound margin, as that's kind of what you're looking for with those two bigs. Yeah, Flag's just the ultimate mismatch nightmare.
Yeah. Now moving on, we had Iowa State with an 11-point win over Marquette. Marquette's first loss of the season. So as we talked about coming in, Marquette's not really the 5th best team in the country. Iowa State got a nice resume builder for themselves this win at home. And they played well offensively, with the exception of Tamin Lipsey, who seems to be a little bit off to start the year. Yeah.
I'll tell you what, Iowa State's not the 6th best team in the country, because they're better than that. I think they're closer to a top 3 team right now. Like I said, I can't buy more stock into this team. Like if they can win high scoring affairs now, the ceiling's a championship. And because they couldn't win these games, they couldn't win a high scoring game in a tournament setting against Illinois last year. And now that they have the firepower, especially in the front court with Jefferson and Jackson, the ceiling is the best team in the country, in my opinion. And Jefferson is especially impressive. He went for 15. I believe he had double-digit rebounds as well. He's just a great passer as the 4-man as well. So yeah, I think those two have been spectacular. And how about Keyshawn Gilbert? I mean, he's been spectacular all year long. He's taken over as the lead guard. He's picking up the slack for Lipsey, who just doesn't really look right. Like we said, I think he was a little bit banged up coming into the season, and he just looks like he's moving a little bit slower. Like his impact's still there defensively, but side to side, like laterally, it's not. He doesn't look the same right now. But Gilbert's picking up the slack, so credit to him. He's an elite rim scorer for a guard. And then another elite rim scorer, Cam Jones, on the other side. Iowa State kind of made life hell for that guy. He went 6 for 21 from the floor. I'm surprised he got as much volume as he did. I thought they were just completely just take away his paint touches, but he's just so good that he finds a way to get into the paint regardless. And he still almost walked away with a triple double, regardless of the what you would call a bad day for him. Missed a few open looks from three, but obviously, it was a little bit uncharacteristic that he wasn't scoring some of these baskets around the rim. But I think they were meeting him a little bit further away from the rim than he would have liked to finish those shots near the basket. And another big factor in this game was Iowa State evening out the turnover margin, because that's where Marquette basically makes a living. They finished 12-11 Marquette, but if Marquette's going to play an elite team, they're going to need to win the turnover margin by 7 or 8 basically every single time, because Iowa State, they shot 71% inside the arc, and they took 11 more free throws in this game. So yeah, if Marquette is if it's going to be an evenly matched turnover game, it's not going to be pretty for them, because I don't think the offensive talent is necessarily that great outside of Cam Jones.
Yeah, it's definitely not. And, to speak to Cam Jones a little bit, I thought despite the tough shooting night, I thought this game really showed the growth of his game. He had 21, 8 rebounds, 9 assists. He's really, with Colette gone, he has to become that playmaker for them. And he's really shown the ability early in this season with a triple-double and a couple near triple-doubles. So, props to him for the growth in his game, the ability to make his teammates better around him. Now, like you said, the offensive firepower right now outside of Cam Jones is not great and not very consistent. David Joplin, again, fell back to what he was doing to start the season. I think he was 3 for 13 and 2 for 7 from 3. So he was 1 for 6 from 2-point range. He needs to give them more than that. If they're going to win some of these big games, he can't just lay an absolute dud on the road. And then to your point, Lipsy just doesn't look right. But luckily for them, Gilbert and Curtis Jones off the bench, they've been fantastic. Curtis Jones, I think, is averaging close to 16 off the bench. So that's been a huge scoring boost for them, where Lipsy hasn't really done much.
Yeah, the shooting is big time. Him, Momcilovic, who hasn't been spectacular to start the year, Nate Heisey as well, hit a couple big shots last night. So yeah, the offensive ceiling is there now. And then one thing to look out for is Chase Ross, who went down, I believe it was the first half, with a pretty bad ankle sprain. I don't think he's going to be playing Saturday. He's probably going to be out a couple weeks. That's big for this team that doesn't really have a ton of ball handling depth, and he's so important on the defensive end. With the havoc that they bring on the defensive side of the ball, it's going to be tough if he's out long term.
Yeah. Now, don't hold us to that. Nigel Pack, we were told, was going to be out 2 or 3 weeks, and he played on Tuesday night. So you never know with college scout injury reports. So just wait till tip off until you really know who's in and who's out.
Yeah, that's the athletic trainer in me from seeing him walk off the floor. So that's basically it there. It didn't look great walking off the floor. So I'm assuming he's going to be out Saturday, but who knows?
Yeah.
The Shaka Smart magic might take over, and they'll go out on Saturday and beat Wisconsin by 50. Might happen.
Now, another game from last night, we had Alabama traveling to Chapel Hill to take on UNC. UNC entered this game as 2.5-point favorites. And early in this game, it looked like UNC was the more desperate team. I thought the first 2.5 minutes, they really turned up the pressure defensively. They forced some turnovers. They forced some tough shots, some uncomfortable shots by Alabama. But after that, for whatever reason, UNC's pressure, their energy seemed to, you could just see it on camera. Their energy just completely depleted, at least on the defensive end. And, I thought after those first few minutes, their defense was quite horrific, especially in transition. Alabama was getting wherever they wanted to go. UNC wasn't picking up the ball very well in transition, and they weren't able to control the ball handler at all. Alabama's guards got downhill, and they were just spraying to open shooters. Aiden Holloway continues to impress, at least shooting the ball. He made some really poor decisions out of ball screens. So seems like he, at least for right now, needs to be more off the ball. I think he turned it over 5 times, and UNC seemed to make it a point that when he came off a ball screen, they were going to come up and like hard hedge, especially where he was made 5 threes. And he just kind of like jumped to pass a lot and was just making poor decisions out of those situations. It seemed like UNC maybe had some life in the second half when Sears was off the court. Those non-Sears minutes, they pushed the ball a few times and got out in transition and cut it to a like 57-48. But ultimately, before Sears got back in, UNC's transition defense let them down again, and I think Hubie ended up having to call a timeout. So, you're not going to win many games giving up 94 points, especially at home. So, props to Alabama for responding to that early pressure from UNC and taking care of business on the road.
Yeah, the defense was definitely my biggest takeaway of this game. It was very bad, and it's bad long term too in my eyes. Like, the defense doesn't force turnovers, and you don't have a good enough like rim deterrent. Like, that's just a combination for disaster. Like, if you're not going to have like an elite inside the arc defense, like, you need to find a way to force turnovers. And I do think the way to do it is you got to hard hedge ball screens. You can't keep playing drop with big men that have shown that they aren't good enough to defend the rim or are good enough decision makers defensively in ball screens. So yeah, it's like this combination is a recipe for disaster. I mean, they're 307th in turnover rate forced in the country. They're 197th in effective field goal percentage allowed, and they're outside the top 100 on the defensive glass. So there's just not a trait that they can fall back on at this point in time. So yeah, their defense would be better served being more aggressive with these quick guards, and they have really good recovery defenders too. So these guys can fly all over the floor. It's just a matter of like, it's really hard to implement like a brand new style in the middle of the season. And I'm just not sure. I don't know if the coaching staff is really up for the task either. So that was a big concern. But yeah, Bama's offense looks like it's going to be just fine, even without Reitzel. They lifted the red shirt off of Houston Millette before the game. He came in, made a couple threes, played like 9 minutes. He's a really talented scorer from Pepperdine. So, but I mean, it was a bit surprising to lift a red shirt on a guy that is probably going to be pretty important to your team now, or would have been pretty important to your team next year. Now this is going to be it for him. And then you're going to add Chris Youngblood, and you're just going to have just elite spot up shooters. It's going to be probably even better than when Reitzel was there without Youngblood and Millette, obviously. But yeah, this is going to be a really lethal offense. Obviously, it takes away from the defense a bit because Reitzel was so good. But yeah, the transition defense for UNC was also bad. But credit Alabama. Like, they're really hard to stop no matter what you try to do. And yeah, they were also just elite up front. I think they did a pretty good job on the glass. And so yeah, overall, it was more negatives from UNC for me. But Alabama proved that they're still this top tier offense, and they can keep up with anybody.
Now, yeah, the thing I thought about with Alabama's offense, I thought they did a really good job spacing out UNC's defense as the game wore on. Sears playing off the ball, coming off some of those pin downs, he was able to curl those and get easy buckets at the rim, or get into the paint and sprayed it to shooters. Mostly Holloway, who hit 5 threes, as I said. The lone bright spot really for UNC was Ian Jackson. He had 23 points off the bench, played a really good game, gave them some energy. But RJ Davis, he was 7 for 24. He's kind of struggled efficiency wise early in this season. Not really sure what the cause is. I expect he'll end up being fine, but in some of these games where he's thrown up, some woeful shooting numbers, not very encouraging for UNC if, they don't have Baycott to rely on the interior anymore. They don't really have any sort of interior scoring presence. So if he's not producing the way that he's capable of, UNC is going to struggle against elite teams.
Yeah, I mean, I think he'll be okay. And I think this offense will be okay in general. Like, even with Davis not being so great, like, Seth Trimble's really helped take the pressure off. So, like, and this perimeter offense is like just the guard group in general is one of the best in the country. So it's obviously more of the defensive side. And obviously you'd like to have a little bit of production up front, and there really hasn't been any, especially from Washington. He hasn't shaped up into the guy that we thought he was going to be. Van Allen Lubin's been easily the better offensive big. I wouldn't say he's been the better defensive big, but yeah, overall it's just, there is a little bit of concern up front, but it's the offensive side is the least of my worries with this team.
Yeah. Now, Scott Drew's squad traveled to UConn last night. Dan Hurley can breathe a little bit easier today, easier than he did a week ago. They squeaked out this win 76-72 against Baylor. And this was just a solid game, but both teams kind of dealing with some injuries.
Yeah, just kind of a weird game in general. I didn't really have many positive takeaways for either team. Obviously Caravan was out for UConn with a concussion. It looks like he's going to be back on Sunday, but who knows with the injury reports. And then Edgecombe might be a little bit more long-term with the hamstring, but so both teams not at 100%, but I wasn't too inspired by either one of these efforts. I think UConn was kind of carried by their home court environment that kind of pushed them over the top in this game. Because, obviously Baylor is the more talented team, but I did think they looked like the better team for longer portions of this game. UConn, they just have a creation issue right now. McNeely picked it up a little bit. Mahaney had a little bit of a good stretch, but the creation issue is just, it's a little bit of a problem. They've never really had this problem with these elite offenses in the last couple of years. Guys like Jalen Stewart and Jaden Ross are being asked to, contribute in some sort of way. And I just don't really think their offensive game is ready. And I don't think they're good enough defenders to really make an impact and play 20 to 25 minutes a game. So yeah, there's definitely some concerns. Diarra probably had one of his better games of the year, finished with 7 assists, but he's not a guy I want the ball in his hands all the time. So, and then on the Baylor side, Rob Wright was fantastic again. He looks like probably the best guard on this team. He might be the most valuable player outside of Norchad Omier. He went for 22 and 4 assists, and he was making a ton of plays in this game when Roach went out. I think he's out with a concussion now too. So this team's even more beat up. But yeah, he's way ahead of schedule. Then one point I wanted to add was, how good would Montverde's starting lineup be if you just threw their lineup together and told them to play a full season of college basketball? It'd be Rob Wright at the point, it'd be McNeely at the 2, Flagg at the 3, Asa Newell, and Derek Queen in the front court. I think this team would have a chance to be maybe a top 5 team in the country. That's just so much talent, and doesn't surprise me that they were obviously the best high school team in the country as well. But yeah, just kind of a fun point there. And then obviously I wasn't inspired by Baylor's defense once again. They've just struggled. They didn't force a ton of turnovers, and obviously that's partly because of Edgecombe. That's where he brings the most value, and they just weren't really able to, turn over this suspect UConn backcourt as much as they would have liked to. So yeah, obviously we've talked about the Baylor defense enough. It's not great, but overall not super inspired by either effort here.
Yeah. Going back to your point about that Montverde starting lineup, especially by season's end, I think that team would be lethal, right? These players are only going to get better and get more comfortable in the college game. Granted, most of them or some of them are probably going to be one and done. They'll be headed to the league next year, but they look, especially Queen. I mean, all of them, but Flagg, Queen, they've been awesome. They've been, as advertised. Queen's probably been better than advertised, as we'll get to here in a few minutes. But yeah, nothing super inspiring from this game. UConn has another tough test this weekend. They play on the road at Texas, who, we'll talk about that game a little bit later, but Texas had a nice road win last night at NC State, low scoring game. But that will definitely be another test for this UConn team that's struggled a little bit. Now, also last night, the number 1 team in the country went down. There were all these great games, and we haven't even talked about that yet. They went to Creighton and they got handled. They lost by, what was it, 13, and you know, Kalkbrenner did a nice job on Dickinson. I don't think it can be stressed enough just how great of a job he does playing as many minutes as he does as a big man, um, being the rim protector that he is without fouling. Like, he played 38 minutes last night, guarding one of the most, like, probably a first team All American, one of the best players in the country in Hunter Dickinson, and he was able to stay on the court for 38 minutes without, getting in any serious foul trouble. So, props to him, and also Pop Isaacs. He was awesome. I think he had 27, 6 for 9 from three. So this was a huge pick me up for Creighton. They really needed this one.
Yeah, Kalkbrenner doesn't get enough credit for how good he is. He's the best defender in the country, and I don't really think it's all that close. I mean, yeah, it's just to deny people from the rim without fouling is a very tough trait, and he makes it look so easy. Like we've said, he's never fouled out of a game in his career, and as a big man, like that's so impressive. Like that can't be understated. But yeah, I mean, I thought Kansas looked pretty terrible, honestly. I thought they played right into Creighton's hands. Obviously we know that McDermott's going to play drop with Kalkbrenner. They just kept going into dribble handoffs with Harris, and Harris was just content with either taking the three when they would go under the ball screen, or he would take a floater in the lane, and he just wasn't efficient, really. He took 21 shots. Like, that has to be the most shots he's ever taken in his career, and he also took 9 threes. And that's just not his game. Like, he's out there to be the table setter for an offense. And when he's the guy taking the most shot volume, you're not going to win a basketball game. I don't think they would have beat very many teams with him taking 21 shots. And yeah, Dickinson, despite how great Kalkbrenner is, he went missing. Like, he needs to be more involved in this offense. Like, Dickinson's a 35% career three-point shooter in his career. He was standing up top, wide open the entire game. Like, he would have the ball in his hands, he wouldn't even look at the basket. Like, he took 2 threes in this game, granted, but he had probably 20 to 25 touches at the top of the key, where if you can get Kalkbrenner away from the rim, like, make a couple threes and get him expanded, and it opens up the entire Creighton defense, because they don't really have another good individual defender on that team outside of Jemiah Neal. And that's just the biggest key in exposing this Creighton defense. And Kansas and Bill Self, I thought Bill Self is probably the best offensive coach in America. I thought they had a pretty bad game plan in this game. Like you played right into Creighton's hands by filtering everything into the best defender in the country through these DHOs, through that they ran a little bit of zoom action in this game, and like you just can't like go right at the rim and go right at the best defender in the country. It's just not going to work, especially when you do it with probably your least talented scorer on your entire roster.
Yeah. Kansas did not look good. I'd like to give a shout out to Mason Miller. Coming into this game, he'd only made 1 3 on the season. I think. So I think and now he's up to 3 for 19, good for 15.4%. So he made 2 last night. So round of applause for him. About time he made a shot. I can only imagine what his dad, for those of you that don't know, Mike Miller, can only imagine what he's been saying after his son started out 1 for whatever he was going into last night, 16 or 17. So about time. They really need his offense.
Yeah, he got filtered out of the rotation quick.
I mean, when you're averaging 1 point a game on, as a guy that's supposed to be a shooter, like, it's awfully hard to keep him out there when he's not really good at anything else.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and a freshman at McAndrew, so that helps.
Yeah. Now, reluctantly, I'm going to bring up this game briefly. Villanova played Cincinnati on Tuesday. I'm going to give Villanova some props here. This is a huge win for them. Cincinnati was 6-0 coming in, 14th in the country, and Villanova did a great job, especially defensively. Eric Dixon had another monster game, 31 points, and they shut down Cincinnati 168-60. So this is a big win for a desperate Villanova team searching for a key win. So this is a nice resume builder for them, without a doubt.
Yeah, I have one comment from this game. It's Eric Dixon. He's phenomenal. And that's about it. I mean, and then one point about Cincinnati is like, I don't think they're as aggressive on offense as they should be. They settle a lot for jumpers. They settle a lot in the mid range. For a team that's as physical as Cincinnati is, they don't really draw any fouls, which I think you could have a lot of success. You know, like Jizzle James, Day Thomas, when Dan Skillings comes back, like those guys should be able to attack the rim basically at will and be able to get to the line. Basically, kind of what Jamie Dixon likes to do at TCU. But Cincinnati, like they kind of just settle for too many jumpers and they draw one of the lowest foul rates in the country, which doesn't really suit what this roster makeup is.
Yeah, no. So, there are plenty other games we could talk about for sure, and we could go on and on probably about some of these games we've already talked about. But we're going to move on. Before we get into the games coming up this weekend and some of the stuff we have coming up here at Mainly Hoops, we're going to talk about some of the biggest surprises and disappointments so far this season. Starting off with Xavier for you, Cody. They're 7-1, but as I said in my write-up today for today's game of the day between them and TCU, that 7-1 start is very, very misleading. They only beat South Carolina State by 3 points over the weekend. And right now they're knotted up at 60 at TCU with like 5 minutes left. But they've been kind of a disappointment despite their record saying otherwise.
Yeah, they've allowed a lot of buy games to hang in with them. It's mostly just the offense I'm a little bit disappointed in. They've shot the ball pretty well, but they haven't really optimized their spacing to really get into the lane and score efficiently. Like realistically, this could be a 5-out offense that really gives teams matchup issues, and they haven't really been able to do that. I think they rank like outside the top 200 and 2-point field goal percentage, which
where they are.
A team that likes to take a bunch of threes.
You know where they are shooting the three though. They're like 58th in the country, 59th in the country in 3-point percentage. Yeah. But from three, from two, they're like in the bottom third.
Which doesn't really make a ton of sense to me. Like if you take a lot of threes and you make a lot of threes, realistically, you should be able to use that to space out defenses and get to the rim a bit easier. Like a Creighton. Like Creighton's always so efficient inside the arc just because of their high volume of threes and they're so hard to guard out there. But yeah, it's mostly just the offense I'm disappointed in. Like the defense has been basically as expected. But guys like Maddox and Hughley and Jerome Hunter haven't been all that great thus far. And like this team was supposed to be built off of their scoring depth and their ability to be super hard to guard in any situation in transition or in the half court. And it just hasn't been that great yet.
Yeah. And as we talked about in the preseason, losing Traore has been key for this team. Because Hughley he can't play a ton of minutes. He's not great, and it has to be the right matchup, and so their big depth is not very good. So they could use Traore's versatility for sure, because he was going to play a huge role for this team.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it takes away from the offensive rebound ability too. Like Traore really would have helped there.
Yeah. Now both of us put this down as a surprise, averaging 22.6 points on 56, 50, 96 splits. Unheard of. John Tonje at Wisconsin did not expect this whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, I thought of him as more of like a 6-man or like depth scoring piece here. I thought Cameron Hunter, the A-Sun transfer, was going to honestly be their starting point guard, but John Tonje he's playing a Johnny Davis type role. Now, hopefully it doesn't have as much of a drop off as Johnny Davis. But
I was going to say, question: which NBA team will take a chance on John Tonje and draft him like 8th overall, and he'll end up in the G League and out of the league within 3 years?
I mean, if it's the Wizards, it's almost a guarantee because they've done that so many times. Like every guy they draft, just besides, I guess, John Wall. has kind of just not been all that
I
good.
mean,
But yeah,
unfortunately, I think the Wizards are going to be too high on the draft board for them to reach for him. If they don't take Cooper Flagg or Dylan Harper, then I think their fan base may demand a sale of the team.
yeah, no, that's definitely a fair point. But yeah, I mean, Tanjay, like, I guess this didn't come out of absolutely nowhere. Like, he was very productive at Colorado State, and like he's dealt with injuries throughout his entire career. Only played like 3 games last year at Missouri when he was supposed to be like a real impact guy. But obviously, averaging 22 points a game was not on my bingo card. So he's absolutely carried this Wisconsin offense, and he's kind of made them what they are right now, despite them, losing to Michigan at home the other day. Like, I still think this Wisconsin team is going to be right in the mix for the Big Ten.
Yeah. Now another surprise for me, and I guess I just didn't expect Derek Queen to be this good this soon. Um, he's averaging almost 17 points, 8 boards, a few assists. He's a great passer, as we've talked about. I know he's only averaging 2.6 assists, but sometimes it's the play that he makes that leads to an assist. Whether it's like a kick out, that's like a difficult pass that moves to a one more for an open shot. Um, but he's been spectacular, especially of late. Last night had 17 and 11 in his first conference game against Ohio State, in a game that they were 5.5 point favorites, and they came out and just steamrolled Ohio State. They beat them 83-59. So Maryland seems to be much more of a force to be reckoned with than I anticipated, at least in the Big Ten for this year, especially if Purdue's going to play the way that they did tonight against Penn State. Like, it leads me to believe that this Big Ten, as we talked about, like, Purdue is not the same team that they've been in the last couple of years, but it leads me to believe that this Big Ten is completely wide open.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely a dark horse with this front court combo. And it wasn't even a front court combo I was high on coming into the year, but I watched one game of Derek Queen and I kind of bought in like super quick just because of his versatility. And like those guys work super well off of each other, and they have shooting now. So that's going to get them in the mix with a great defense.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, a disappointment for me, I think coming into the year, this was my top transfer. I almost went in a different direction here. I'll throw another name out there in a second, but AJ Storr has not been very good. He's averaging like 9 points, a drop off of 7 points a game. Granted, the opportunities are probably a little bit down from what he had at Wisconsin because the team at Kansas is just better. They have Hunter Dickinson, obviously, but this team's in need of some scoring. And DeJuan Harris, as you said, took 21 shots last night, 9 threes. Like, he should not be taking that many shots. AJ Storr should be that guy that is a secondary scoring option for this Kansas team, and he's averaging only 9 points on 44% shooting. Pretty big drop off in terms of efficiency for him, and points per game. So I guess I was just expecting a little bit more out of him. Maybe he'll get there, but we're 8-9 games in for a lot of teams now. You'd think he would have found his way by now.
Yeah, I definitely expected him to be a little bit better than what he's been here. I was never too high on like the shooting ability, but the explosiveness and ability to play in transition was something that was supposed to translate, and it hasn't really translated yet. But good thing they have a bunch of other weapons, or else like just like last year, like it could have turned into like a long year for Kansas standards.
Yeah. Now the other name I'm briefly going to throw out there, John L. Davis. We've talked about him several times. But he hasn't been very good either. Granted, I don't think a lot of it is his fault. I don't think that Coach Cal is putting him in great situations to score and utilize his skill set. He did have a better game the other night at Miami. I think he had 12 points or something, hit a few shots. So hopefully he can build on that. Also wanted to shout out, I know we haven't talked since that game. I wanted to shout out Coach Cal for playing Trevon Brazile. He entered the starting lineup. He had a solid game. So hope to see more of him moving forward. As I said, I think he can be a key piece for this team.
Yeah, Davis's lack of production is 100% on Cal, in my opinion. Maybe 95% of it's on Cal. Like Davis could, when he gets the ball, maybe just not give it up, go make a play for himself. But that's just not the type of player he is. He was brought up by Dusty May, who, he preaches, share the basketball and like play as a unit.
If you watched their game against Northwestern in the tournament last year and the final possession before it went to overtime, you would think that he didn't know how to share the ball because he dribbled it up top for like 25 seconds and jacked a three.
Yeah.
But exactly. Yeah, he needs to be better. And hopefully Coach Cal recognizes that he's not utilizing him in the right way. But either way,
he's not going to. He's not going to find out.
No, he won't. Just going to waste a great get in the portal, unfortunately. But either way, there have been some great bright spots, some massive letdowns across the country so far this season. I know it's still early, but we have some solid games this weekend. Again, it's still football season. It's conference championship weekend in college football. So after this, we'll start to get some better weekend games. But for right now, weekend games are a little bit tougher to come by. But we do have some decent ones. We've got Wisconsin at Marquette, as we already talked about. Both teams coming off losses. Marquette's the home team in this one, but should be a good game here, especially if Chase Ross is unable to go.
Yeah, I mean, first off, just get the college football out of my face here. We need better Longhorns. Saturday slates. We haven't got a good Saturday. Oh yeah, okay. I'll cheer for them with you. But
go Longhorns.
Yeah, we need better Saturday slates. That starts up pretty soon, so I'm pretty excited for that. But we got a good one with Wisconsin and Marquette. Yeah, both teams are coming off losses. But yeah, obviously Wisconsin's home loss feels a little bit more disappointing. You're losing to an upstart Michigan team that they've looked pretty good for the most part. So, but like we said, the health of Chase Ross is key in this game. Went down with that ankle sprain on Wednesday, and yeah, their guard depth falls off super quick. So that could be trouble in this game. And for a Wisconsin team that's beaten Marquette in each of the last 3 seasons, and I think it's a pretty good matchup for them. I'm probably just gonna go ahead and fade Marquette again. But Wisconsin takes care of the ball, and they should have an advantage on the glass. And those are the 2 areas that you can really get to Marquette. Wisconsin's going to be super motivated, but the one area is they probably don't have anyone to guard Cam Jones, and he could throw for 25 to 30, maybe even 35 in this game, because I just don't think this Wisconsin defense is talented enough to contain him. And if you really sell out to guard him, they don't have good enough recovery defenders to really guard anybody else on this roster. So, but all in all, I'll predict a close Marquette win, but I wouldn't be at all surprised if Wisconsin won on the road, just as they did 2 years ago. They beat them 3 straight times, and yeah, I think it's a bad matchup for Marquette.
Yeah, if Chase Ross can't go, it's going to be tough, I think, for Marquette, especially against a Wisconsin team that typically takes care of the basketball. Marquette thrives off of forcing turnovers. This Wisconsin team, they typically take care of the ball. So if they're unable to force turnovers and they don't have Chase Ross out there to, kind of help spearhead that backcourt defense that puts pressure on teams, that could be a key loss. But as you said, Cam Jones, he should have a massive game in this one. I'm calling for a Cam Jones 40-piece and a Marquette win. That's a little bold probably, but I'm here for it. I'm a big Cam Jones guy, especially with how he's just a fun guy to watch, right? And he makes, as I said earlier in the episode, he makes these guys around him so much better. So I'm excited to watch this game. And Wisconsin actually has shown some offense this year, so this game should be a fun one.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, wouldn't at all be surprised if Jones went for 40.
Yeah. Now Saturday in Seattle, we have Kentucky, another big game. Basically a road game. No, it's not in Spokane, but might as well be. Kentucky against Gonzaga. This should be another fun game, another fast-paced game. Kentucky loves to shoot the 3. Gonzaga, obviously one of the most high-powered offenses in the country. They love to get out and run, shoot the three as well. So this should be a really fun game.
Yeah, definitely a fun up and down game. I think both teams have advantages on offense as well, so that's going to create for an even more fun game. I think Kentucky can space out these Gonzaga bigs who aren't necessarily comfortable defending in space. In EK and Braden Huff, whichever one they want to utilize. Because few has been able to go to either guy. So, but yeah, they might struggle to defend the dribble handoff action that Kentucky will go with. Like Amari Williams is really good in operating in those situations. So. But on the other end, like Gonzaga should have a pretty efficient day in the post-up game. Like they're probably going to use EK quite a bit there, and Kentucky's not going to double because they want to keep you off the 3-point line. And if you do double, Gonzaga has way too many shooters, way too many weapons to kind of hurt them. And all in all, I do think Gonzaga wins with their semi-home crowd. Not sure if Kentucky's defense is necessarily for real. They've had some good efforts, but once again, pretty fortunate defending the 3-point line. Like even like against unguarded threes, they've been pretty fortunate. So yeah, I'll take Gonzaga to win in Seattle.
Yeah, I'm with you here. I think Gonzaga takes care of business. Kentucky unfortunately loses their second straight, but I think that's gonna maybe put them where they really belong in terms of national rankings, right? They're not, as I said, they're not the fourth best team in the country. Getting a couple of losses on their schedule this week will really, I think, just settle them to where they really belong and probably like that mid-teens range, give or take. So look for Gonzaga here. As you said, I think EK, I know he wasn't very happy last week. It didn't seem like it anyway with the number of minutes he was playing. So I think he'll be motivated tomorrow to show up against a quality opponent in Kentucky and put up a good game.
Yeah, I think he's going to be super
Saturday.
efficient. Yeah, he'll be super efficient in the post-up game. I think he's going to be the big that plays over Huff because, Kentucky's bigs can guard in space too.
Yeah. There's also a game on Sunday. We have Texas A&M against Texas Tech. This game's going to be played in Fort Worth. This is big for Texas Tech. This is a key game for them.
Yeah, I think they're going to be ready for the task too. Like, no, they haven't really gotten any recognition, either whether it's through the AP poll or just really in like the casual college basketball viewer's eyes. Really their first time on the national stage. They could have had a matchup with Texas in that early MTE, and they fell to St. Joe's in a game where they gave up a million threes and didn't make any of their own. But I'm not too concerned about that effort overall. And then on the flip side, A&M's super battle tested, but I do like the matchup for Texas Tech way more. I think they're going to get a ton of spot up shooting opportunities against this A&M defense that, they prefer to kind of take away the rim. They're not super concerned with getting out the shooters with high intent anyway. And, Texas Tech has basically shooters at 4 positions pretty much at all times. And then JT Toppin at the 5, who can kind of match what A&M does on the offensive glass with the offensive rebounding of his own. I think he has one of the highest offensive rebound rates in the country right now. Although he did miss last game, I think I've heard he's going to play tonight, or on Sunday. Well, one guy they are going to miss, and it looks like he's going to miss the rest of the year, is Devin Cambridge. They announced that he's going to be out with some kind of medical concern. They didn't really say what it was. So hopefully everything's all right there. But I think they have enough wing depth to kind of to fill in his role. He was more of a bench piece, but he's a super important defender for this team. But all in all, I do think Texas Tech shoots their way to a win, and they have enough guys to guard Wade Taylor.
I think Wade Taylor is going to shoot Texas A&M out of a win. Let me put it that way. He's a fun player, but man, like when he's hot, he's hot. When he's cold, he is cold. I like Texas Tech here. I think this will be big for them in regards to the AP poll, for whatever that's worth. Key point about the AP poll: there was still a voter last week that voted for UConn to be in the top 10 still. They lost 3 straight games. How can you they lost 1 to Colorado, who we are so down on. how can you put UConn? How can you justify still keeping them in the top 10? It's beyond me. Like that AP poll nonsense is crazy.
Yeah. Somebody also voted for Columbia, for what it's worth. Put him in the 25 spot. I just don't understand it. Like, that's why I don't pay attention to the AP poll at all. Like, Texas Tech not getting consideration. Like, you just have to know that Texas Tech is a really good team. Like, a lot of these guys probably don't even watch the games. You know, I mean, Duke wins a game at Arizona, who's like, that's always going to be a good win, no matter what Arizona looks like. And Duke goes up, one spot for having, like, probably the best win of the season at that point in time, the best road win of the year. So, yeah, just I'll just completely disregard the AP poll. I'm more concerned about other things. You know, Ken Palm, like Torvik, I value their opinion a little bit more.
Or just like eye test, you know. That's really all that matters, and who's actually in the tournament come March. But yeah, AP poll, just a bunch of nonsense. Now, also on Sunday, last game we're going to talk about, UConn at Texas. Key game for Texas. As we mentioned, they had a nice road win last night. UConn coming off the home win against Baylor. This game, I don't really know what to expect. Texas has struggled. They rely a lot on Trey Johnson. He takes a lot of shots. He takes a lot of tough shots. He makes a lot of tough shots. But they need Tremont Mark, I think, still. I just don't trust this Texas offense enough. So I think especially if Caravan's back, I'm probably going to be on the side of UConn, as much as it pains me to say that because I'm a Texas fan. I think I'd probably like UConn to go on the road and win this game and really get themselves back on track with 2 quality wins in a row.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at any outcome here. I don't think UConn's truly fixed their issues, even though they beat a good Baylor team at home. But I'm not high on Texas either. I don't think they don't have their offense figured out either. It's half of it's give the ball to Trey Johnson and take a tough 2 or an off the dribble 3. And they have other offensive weapons that they can go to. I just don't think they just haven't figured out how to play together. So a little bit of concern there. Texas is an elite defense. Caden Shedrick doesn't really get enough credit for how good of a rim protector he is. But overall, I mean, Texas probably has the best unit on the floor with their defense. But yeah, if UConn has Caravan back, they can absolutely hang around. But I'll slightly lean to Texas just because that place, the Moody Center, is a tough place to play. You know, that environment is it's pretty chaotic in there now. So yeah, I'll back Texas to win a close one.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't be surprised by either outcome. I don't trust Texas enough, and I'm going to be harder on my own team than I am on others, just because, you know, I have higher expectations for them, and they haven't really played that well yet. So until they win a game against a quality opponent, I'm probably not going to trust them. So I'm going to back the better coach and maybe the better team, but Texas does have that home court advantage in this one. So I guess we'll see. Should be a good game, I think. But, you know, it's been a great week of games. We got some solid games on deck this weekend. Nothing crazy yet, but as we said, it'll start to pick up here in the next couple of weeks. But, you know, stay tuned. We're going to be coming out with another Best Bets episode, probably going to be released on Saturday morning. Then we're going to record tomorrow, but going to be giving out our best bets for the weekend. As we talked about, we're going to continue to do those twice a week, typically Tuesday, Friday, giving out our best picks and some leans for some games. And so we're hoping this creates some good engagement from you guys, especially where we're keeping those episodes a little bit shorter. So definitely looking forward to continuing those and keep up with some of these articles that we're putting out. And you know, other than that, you know, looking forward to the next episode and continuing to build the Mainly Hoops brand.